have to say, this is the strangest and most wonderful conversation I will have ever had on this show, because Joe Wakshlag and Justin Shmalberg are really famous. Joe's really famous. He's the outside guy. Justin's the behind the scenes vibe coding guy. And they are pretty brilliant about pet nutrition. And Joe's not a well-kept secret. Justin is. But what frustrated me for a long time, having known Joe now for maybe a decade, he is the go-to guy for all kinds of straight in the middle of the road nutrition things, or off the beaten track like CBD, Elevet, or omega-3. He was like the go-to guy for a long time. So you two came up with a company that has an ingredient that people can put into home-cooked food, as well as now recipes. But you've kept this a well-kept secret. And I have been bugging you for a really long time and saying, please, could you please, with IVI, be a sponsor of this show so that I can brag about you all the time, so we can do this conversation, so I can write a blog. And you're here. Now, Justin's in Costa Rica, which is a little exotic. Joe and I are on the East Coast, so we're boring. But you know what really inspired me? My godmother, Joan Rivers, used to feed her little dogs. She had a Japanese chin. She had the famous Yorkie that was on her TV show with her. She had a Pekingese, and she would feed them either some of the ding-dongs, I'm not making this up, that she ate for breakfast. So that didn't disturb me a lot, like totally. Or she would just give them rotisserie chicken. And I was like, no, this is not okay. It's not a balanced meal. And then my sister, who has two little Brussels Griffins, we feed them anything that falls off the counter and rotisserie chicken. So can you guys talk a little bit, maybe first Joe, then Justin, about why rotisserie chicken, leave aside ding-dongs, why rotisserie chicken is not a complete and balanced meal for a dog, and why at some point it's going to do harm to various of their organs?
I guess I can comment that if you ate rotisserie chicken all by itself every day of your life, you'd end up with some pretty severe metabolic deficiencies. We'll just say calcium's going to be a necessary thing that you're just not going to get. Same thing. Zinc, not enough B12, not enough vitamin D. There's something about health and longevity and having a complete and balanced diet. I think we're even seeing that now in the human world, where people
Yep.
are being sold, hey, guess what? That multivitamin is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to your health span to some degree. And Justin said, hey, let's try to put something together. And I said, yeah, I'm a vitamin and mineral guy. And he goes, let's go beyond vitamin and minerals. And since he's the expert in sort of an Eastern approach to we'll just say feeding, he basically took, we'll just say, the typical veterinary nutritionist thing and slanted it in a way that's just going to be overall more healthful with botanicals and flavonoids, carotenoids, et cetera. So I'll let Justin talk about him being the real mastermind behind this, the poster child.
The two of them, you guys will see in this little conversation we're having what a delightful pair they are. They are so humble, and they're so like, no, we're okay. We don't need to promote it because we have 11 and a half clients. I'm making this up. They have a lot of clients, and a lot of vets know them and respect them. But I'm like, but there are thousands of people who would buy this wonderful component. I don't know, what do we call it? An additive, but additive sounds too chemically, that people could add to more or less whatever they want to feed, although now you have recipes. And they could avoid veterinary diets from the veterinarian, which many dogs won't eat. This isn't to bash them, but many dogs won't eat them, and they're wildly expensive. Or a lot of other prepared foods that people can't afford that come to them frozen, and maybe it doesn't even address the needs of their particular dog. So I think what you guys have created should be shouted from the rooftops. That sincerely, people do want to cook for their dogs, but they need their hand held by you guys because their own vet doesn't have the time or the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah, I think both Joe and I have been strong proponents of home prepared diets and use them, as you said, clinically, right? There's plenty of dogs, cats that we encounter that maybe there's just not a great commercial diet option, or the owners want more control, or we need more flexibility. And I don't know how many diets I've done or Joe has done, probably collectively tens of thousands, I would think, at this point in time. So in the early days, this conversation between Joe and I was, we were obviously using a range of products to balance diets. And we really saw a gap for developing our own. What were the things that really were absent from most of the home prepared diets people were doing on their own, rather than just using the kind of kitchen sink approach of putting everything in there? What are the other inclusions that might be interesting? Things like plant-based digestive enzymes, prebiotics to support the gut. And yeah, I think it's been almost 10 years now we've had the product. And it's really about, I think, making it more accessible, right? Rather than marketing. For us, it was a solution to a real problem we had over the years. And so we're just happy it's available. And if it helps people feel more confident in home prepared feeding, I think that's hugely exciting to us.
It is exciting, especially people with animals with cancer. That's my first go-to, is that when an animal is diagnosed with cancer, people think, of course, they're sad, and they know this is going to shorten the life. So they're going to have a shortened lifespan. And they also, if the dog or cat is going through chemo, radiation, surgery, now the animal is really more compromised or stressed. And they say, okay, no more commercial food. I want to feed. I want to feed myself. But they have some wackadoo idea that came from that human keto thing, which has honestly been disproven. I'm just going to feed protein because that's really good for cancer. No, it's not. But a balanced diet would be, and a palatable one that you would feel happy and loving to feed, but that's fully balanced. So do you address cancer in particular, or just any of your balanced ingredients would help with a home cooked meal?
I think we have a plan there that I think a lot of integrative oncologists have glommed onto nowadays. It's one of our, I'll just say, leading veterinary bases right now are veterinary oncologists, because people want to do something that they can do at home. They want to get away from a lot of things. They want to get away from the preservatives, and they want to get away from they like to call them fillers, the fibers. And so we've provided the platform so that they can do that. And then I think Justin and I are pretty big proponents of, we'll say, essential fatty acids, and having them come from some slightly different sources than just soybean oil, right? I'll say diets are a bit exotic to some degree, that it may take a little bit more time to put together and find the right ingredients, but they're, we'll say, solidly based in good, healthy nutrition, particularly when the dog's not eating particularly well. So
yeah, and going through a time that emotionally is more stressful to the human often than to the dog. Cat, but it is a relationship, and you have to respect both ends of the leash. If the person's freaking out and is thinking, I should only feed rotisserie chicken, back to that, because protein's good against cancer. Guys, you're not going to stop cancer in its tracks. Chemo might, surgery might, radiation might, but feeding well will nurture both you emotionally and the dog physically. Justin, when Joe uses the word exotic, because you are skilled and knowledgeable in Eastern thoughts about wellness and health, can you talk about some of the things that are in your balanced additive generally, and then for cancer? Because people learn about it, but they're like, oh, mushrooms, they don't really quite know. So what are the things that are your go-to ingredients that you know are important for balance and for health?
Sure, absolutely. And I think just to echo what Joe was saying about what we call nutritional oncology, right? Diets for cancer. I think it's the greatest example here, where we know that nutritional deficits are probably suboptimal, particularly if the dog's also getting chemo and some other things at the same time. They're going to have increased metabolic demands. And beyond changing carbs and proteins, which I do think can be a useful strategy in some of these animals that have cancer, my background, I guess we can call it Eastern, right? But is really studying supplements, herbal medicine. Some of those come from Chinese medicine. They also may come from what we call the Western herbal tradition. But it's really about, what do we have evidence that may be helpful beyond just food, beyond drugs. And some of these botanical compounds, I think, certainly fall into that category. We do have maitake mushroom as an example in balance, which we think are in our balancing compound. We also have things like licorice root, which has been used for a long time for sort of gastrointestinal stomach upset. And there may be some emerging evidence, particularly at higher doses, that it can have a positive effect. And so we put things like that, plant-based digestive enzymes, to provide a little additive boost that may be under stress or have cancer. And then, of course, those nutrients that we see most commonly being absent or deficient, I should say, in home prepared diets. So these could be things like higher doses of vitamin E, as an example, trace minerals.
Yes.
And then not within our supplement itself, not within IVI Blend, but we're also recommending some sort of calcium. We have a product called Calci that provides that because you need quite a bit of calcium for a lot of these home prepared diets because meat is typically quite low. So those are the factors that we've looked at over the years and put in the product. And again, we hope people find success with it.
Because they don't know about the calcium issue. Is calcium heart related for the most part in terms of animal health? Is it the heart that needs it the most?
It's involved in a host of metabolic functions. I think the one that's most severe, and this happens to switch gears a little bit more in puppies,
Would be
or
bones.
kittens, is bone
Yeah,
development,
yeah,
right? And we've had certainly cases of people fed home prepared raw diets, cooked diets, where they actually
Right.
have what we call pathologic fractures because there's just not enough
Oof.
calcium to support growth.
Ouch.
And interestingly, this is a bit of a tangent, but I actually saw this in a 14-year-old dog, which would be super rare because they have a lot of bone stores. But this dog was fed a unbalanced home prepared diet for, I think, 6 years. The owner was adopting a food therapy approach. And unfortunately, the correction would have been relatively simple had we have caught it years before. And we did correct it, and the dog did fine, but it had a bunch of fractures that the owner wasn't aware of.
At 14 years old, this dog didn't have enough calcium in the diet.
Correct. Yeah. And its vitamin D was also low. It measured as 0.
Wow.
So
That happened to me when I was feeling punk a couple of years ago because I don't hang in the sun at all. And it was low, like 0. And I felt like a wet dish rag amongst other kind of brain fog and stuff. So I didn't know you could check a dog's vitamin levels in their blood. I should know that.
Joe's the vitamin D guy, so you're going to have to.
Yeah. So what about that, Joe? Should we all be checking our dog's vitamin D or not if they're on a commercial diet?
Yeah, I think that the reality is most of the commercial diets probably have 3 times what's probably necessary. And so if you're on a commercial, but we see a lot of folks are, and I think this is the trend, and this is why we're doing what we're doing, is back in the early 2000s or late 1990s, it was like maybe 2% of people were doing primarily sort of their own thing, whether it was rotisserie chicken or a home prepared diet by somebody who's got some nutrition gravitas. And now we're in the 20s, right? Where 20% of people are giving a major proportion. So it's okay. Now we're going to start to see some of these things that Justin's talked about. And I've seen it too, particularly in kittens and puppies, where that's why every vet just feels, just do a commercial dog food. I want to take one thing off my differential. I just want nutrition to be a problem because nobody can do it right. There are so many resources now, and I think we have a good one too, where people can do it right. And I think with the AI generative craze that's going on, we're going to see a lot of these types of the things pop up where, hey, if you want to do home cooked, go ahead. Here's the program. Just enter your dog's name, et cetera, enter medical conditions and things of that nature, and it'll spit something out. Now, whether it's going to be perfect may not be the case because you don't have that quote unquote client relationship, and sometimes you don't know the nuances and bad information, but it's going to cover a lot of bases. And that's part of why we put together our recipe formulators, because to do some real, say, general things, single disease like kidney disease, it's not hard to make up a plan that's going to be supportive and be as good, if not better, than the therapeutic diets.
Is that true of bladder stones also?
Well, it depends on the kind, right?
Yes, Struvite, oxalate. I had a dog that had bladder stones, a young Weimaraner, embedded in the wall of his bladder, so they weren't seen originally on ultrasound. And he nearly died, but he didn't die. And they put him on this urinary tract diet, a vet one, the $100 a bag. Back in those days, it was $50 a bag. And the dog got cellulite after a couple of months because in a Weim, you can see everything. So at that point, I looked at the ingredient deck, and it was basically fiber and pork fat. That was it. And a few other maybe vitamins and minerals. I'm like, oh, great. I'm feeding my dog pork fat. And it was just turning to fat. Now, that's obviously a layperson's reaction. That's not something you could scientifically prove. But I got him off the food. Now, knowing that he was prone to stones, and a lot of people have dogs with bladder stones, and knowing that if you feed a veterinary diet that's supposed to prevent one kind of stones, it very often creates the other kind. This is just the pendulum swinging. But I could have come to your website, I assume, and found a diet and used your balancing ingredients to, yes, feed him
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, if we have a urinary diet on there, that one's general, like your dog has urinary tract
Right,
issues. It could be both. Not truly tailored towards my dog is a chronic, this kind of stone dog, right? Or my
right,
dog has purines or stones. And those need that extra level of care. That needs the veterinary nutritionist to maybe get involved, particularly when you have like maybe two types of stones or one or two, and you've got a liver problem on top of it. Now it's like
right.
you need to get someone involved, I think.
Yeah,
But I think there's a lot of general, my dog's got, I need a low fat diet for GI. I need a low fat diet for
right.
pancreas issues.
Yes,
Easy enough to do, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And I
And I think,
assume, Justin, that if I go to my vet and they say, "What are you feeding?" which they ask, and I used to give them this laundry list of things I was feeding, and they'd never heard of them. They were commercial diets, but the kind of high end, the Honest Kitchen or Evermore or something. They're like, I
sure.
don't know what that is. But if you say to them, "I'm home feeding with a recipe from IVI," and they're balancing, I assume vets know you well enough to say, "Oh, all right," and not be threatened or worried that you're going off the rails. Is that true?
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope they'd be okay with that. But I do think there are differences in the quality of recipes you can find online. And I think Joe and I have tried to use our clinical experience to come up with these. But I do want to say, and I think bladder stones is a classic example, it's no substitute for monitoring, right? Whether we're using a
Yes,
commercial diet or
yes,
we're using a home prepared diet. I think the real secret is nutrition needs to be personalized, right? So we
yes,
probably need to do an ultrasound every once in a while. We need to
yes.
check the urine and see what's happening because it's not so simple as we pick any diet, even if it's what we
Yeah,
think is the best
yeah,
diet, and magic happens, right? We still need to tweak it. And going back to just how commercial diets were formulated, why people are doing home prepared, I think what's been really interesting is the first group of diets, what I call pet food 1.0, was all
yeah,
about nutrients, right? Like, how do we
right.
get the nutrients right for bladder stones? Pet food 2.0, which we're in now, is what are the ingredients, right? Owners really like ingredients they can
Yeah,
see, they can
yeah.
understand. But I think pet food 3.0 is about personalization and
Hmm.
processing and those impacts on health. And that's where I think home prepared has stood out for people is, oh,
Yes,
I can, if this diet isn't working, I can change the protein source instead of going to find a different commercial diet, which honestly is sometimes harder for Joe and I, right? If a commercial diet doesn't work, than saying,
yeah.
hey, we got those results, let's tweak the home prepared diet. So still a big role for individual consultation about nutrition, for
But there
sure.
aren't that many people one can consult with. One's own vet has to turn to guys like you and do a sub conversation because it's not their wheelhouse. And speaking of monitoring the pee, it's so funny you should say that. I just came upon a stash. That dog has been dead a decade. A stash of the pee sticks, right? You stick the
Oh,
little
sure.
thing in the pee, and is it yellow or green? And oh, which color of green? Doing your pool, but it's pee.
Mhm.
And I thought, I think I should donate these back to my vet clinic because I hope to not have another bladderstone dog. It does require your vet's involvement, which is good. If you have a dog with a medical problem, you can't cure it with a magic wand with food. As you said, Joe, earlier, people are now thinking about what they're eating and what they're putting in themselves. And I've been a supplement taker myself ever
Yeah.
since I grew up in California in my early 20s when vitamins were not considered woo woo. They were just what people did. And I've never stopped.
Yeah,
People people don't get it about vitamins and that they're valuable.
I think for you and I, because of our dietary habits, we're probably subpar on a lot of nutrients on a
Hmm.
daily basis. And that's why it's always been nice to say, I'm doing the old multivitamin and
Yeah.
mineral, I'm getting my recommended daily allowance. And maybe I ate a bunch of nuts and I have a little more copper in them today, but not a big deal. But I think that's where we kind of stand out from a lot of
Yeah.
the other products that are out there is that you can get just the straight vitamins and minerals, but you can also get some of the botanicals, and right? So it's like
I like that.
uh, the
It makes me
that's what we're
wonder,
thinking.
should I be giving one of your, if I'm feeding commercial kibble along with
Mhm.
different forms of protein, should I still be buying what you make because I don't have those botanicals in the diet of an 11-year-old dog who has some kind of a shadow on her liver that I have not pursued and she's
Mhm.
in great health, but I feel like there's something fishy going on inside? What if I was giving her those marvelous, what did you say, plant-based botanicals,
Mhm.
prebiotics? It sounded like, oh, I want some of those.
I think at that point is when that's when you sit back and say, am I going to be feeding commercial only, or am I going to be feeding a little bit of both? And a lot of people like to do a little bit of both, and then it's where you have to tailor it. And yeah, maybe something like our IVI blend can help in that respect. And then more importantly, I think, is to get a little bit involved with a Justin of the world. And I dabble, but he's a little bit more well versed, and say, I'd like to consult with you on what botanicals
Right.
I might want to put in on top of whatever we're doing. Because I think there are other botanicals that can have some benefits in various types of, we'll say, cancers, as well as even kidney fibrosis. And, right,
Pancreatitis.
there are just certain botanicals that have, we'll say, more anti-inflammatory capabilities
Yeah.
than others. And you can give those in, we'll just say, ample quantities to probably have a physiologic effect versus the old, we'll just call it the sprinkling of the pixie dust, which is what a lot of the
Yeah.
supplements do. We're talking about putting in
Yeah.
enough supplement to have that.
You used to say about omega-3s, I remember when I interviewed you more than once about it, that every single cell in the body needs to be saturated with it. So you have to give an ample dose and have it continuously going into the system. So my dogs and I are both on some form of ultra omega-3s twice a day, because that's what Joe said 10 years ago, and I took it to heart. So can a regular human go to Justin, or only a vet?
I'm not sure I would recommend it for the Practice Act, if nothing else. But no, oh, you're talking about, sorry, I thought you meant for your own advice, for your
yes,
for human's
not for
nutritional
me.
advice.
I mean, I
was like,
wouldn't
Tracy,
mind.
I thought we're signing up for a consult here, but now I understand the question better.
But I wouldn't mind even for me, but even for just, can people go to you for their own dog, or does it have to be through their vet?
Yeah, so we always like to have veterinarians involved, right?
Yeah.
Because we typically need records, and we like to use all of the information we have to, again, to really get to a personalized solution. I think how we've worked this so far is Joe and I have been in academics for some time too as well. So some of our work has been done there, some of it's been through IVI. So I think for most people out there interested in custom advice, they usually write in to us at IVI, and then we figure out what's the best match, how can we facilitate what they're looking for? Because in many cases, if it's easy, it might be like, hey, we think you should start with a recipe we already have, right? We don't think we need to overcomplicate. If it's complicated, then sometimes it's a question of getting their vet engaged first to get those tests that we need and go from there. And nutritionists are, even though there's few of us, we all have different styles too.
Yes.
And some people are better matched to different styles, right? And different foci. I mean, Joe and I sometimes joke about if we're trying to design the same diet for the same thing, we come up with very different initial recipes sometimes.
That's cool, but that's great. That makes it a really balanced partnership and valuable to the end user, who's getting the value of both of your brains going to work on something. There's a link to IVI on the website of Tracy Hotchner Pets, or Integrative Veterinary Solutions is the real full name of the company. And anybody can go there, just in wrapping up, and get these recipes. If you have an animal who's not well, you really should write in to Joe and Justin, and or ask your vet to confer with them, because you guys confer with vets. But if you have a well dog, you could keep them well by, if you want to, cook and then make it fully balanced. And cook different things. It doesn't have to be the same diet every day. You can have fun. You can be kind of Julia Child, but not exactly. And you can lose the rotisserie chicken, which is good, because the chickens that are raised to go on the rotisserie have a very bad life, as I understand it. And they aren't necessarily all the kind of meat and fat that you should be having. So I really appreciate you guys trusting that the people that listen to this show, enough of them are either wanting to cook or are cooking, and they secretly know that they're not really doing the best job, and they'll check out what IVI has to offer and become loyal and devoted to what you're doing. And then Justin and I will talk separately about probiotics for me. What the hell? There are no human doctors that I trust that are doing this. You guys really have walked the walk and done the research, and in the end, we're all just mammals, right? Not exactly, but we're just all mammals. So I say thank you for helping the dog and cat mammals, and maybe the human mammals will benefit too. Maybe it will encourage them to take multivitamins and or omega-3s, and maybe even prebiotics or probiotics, right? It could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We do sometimes see that people invest in their animal's health first, right?
Yes.
Their pet's health, and then they discover things about their own health, which is always exciting.
Exactly.
But either way, we're happy to help, hopefully in a small way, with pet health and provide
Thank
a
you.
resource to people.
And we have heard from a client or two that they put the recipe in the refrigerator and their teenage son came home, cooked it up and heated it up and said, yeah, it wasn't, it was bland. Okay.
That was one of Joe's diets. That wasn't one of my diets.
No, no,
bland.
Justin's are very snappy. Justin's have lots of pizzazz. Either way, I love what you're doing. I love working with you. Now I get to write the blog because I will refer it back to this conversation, which I hope everybody has enjoyed as I have. Thank you both so very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having it.
Yep. See you, Tracy.
See ya.
Okay.